Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Hello, this is Werewolf the Podcast, the serial killer drama, and this is episode 192, and the Professor is still driving into the Scottish mountain. Oh, God. Goodness, my accent's pretty awful. That's why my brother Chris is playing the Garrow today, because he can do a Scottish accent, which I can't, so thanks, Chris. Also, we would like to welcome our new partners, Grendel Press. They're an amazing publishing house in America that are finding some incredible authors and literature in the horror genre and getting it out there for you horror lovers. And as you know, we're horror lovers, so we're loving working with them. We here at the podcast feel privileged to work with them and their team. They're a hard-working team. So I've left a link to the website in the description. Go have a look-see. They're working hard to further the horror genre. And, give them some support. And they're fantastic. And I can't say any more about them. I'll find some more superlatives later. Apart from that, enjoy.
Welcome. Make yourself comfortable. If you're sitting down, become aware of the areas of your body that are in contact with the chair. Become aware of your weight upon your feet, in your heels, in the balls of your feet, in your toes. Become aware of grounding with the planet Earth.
Professor, what the hell are you talking about?
Huh? What's that? What time is it? Oh, bloody hell, I'm in the wrong studio. I've taken a side job doing voice meditations for the Calm app. I'm really sorry. I'll be back when I'm done.
Sorry, sorry, I was in the other studio with the bloody werewolf lot. Lunatics they are, a lot of them.
The Professor. I had no choice now. I had to obey the speed limits, something I'm not used to doing, especially on such dazzling countryside roads as these. Typically, when weaving my way uphill and down dale, past slumbering estates and between endless patchworks of working farms and small holdings, I would be on the limit. The very limit of what my skill and nerve could manage. It gives me a thrill, you see. Always has. I used to ride horses in the same manner back in the day. Switching between 40, 50 and 60 mile an hour zones on the open roads and occasionally down to 30 or even 20 as I drove through one small village after another. I couldn't help but feel as though I was tethered, held back in some way. In hindsight, I suppose I was. Held back, that is. But for me, the tether was in the form of the dead vampire I had unceremoniously stuffed into the boot of my little hatchback. I simply couldn't afford to get pulled over for speeding. What if the officer in question asked to have a look in the back? What then? He would find in there a huge deceased human male with a sparkling antique dagger protruding from his chest. I mean, It really would have been quite awkward. The signal on my sat-nav became erratic, and I switched to using my phone, which sat in a tiny cradle that was attached to one of the dashboard vents. In time, that signal too came and went. It was a worry, as Ernest had told me that Sithean Blair is only noted on a single signpost on the A93, and if you miss it, you literally miss it, and you're off into the wilderness that is the Cairngorms mountain range in the eponymous national park, which just happens to be the very largest in the United Kingdom. I decided to stop in the old town of Braemar and ask for directions the old-fashioned way. Seemed like a sensible thing to do. I pulled over at the side of the road in what appeared to be the centre of town, by which I mean there was a small concentration of ancient-looking local shops on either side of the road. The rain had stopped, and it had brightened up a bit, so I was surprised to see not another living soul in any direction. I resolved to pop into one of the shops and ask the shopkeeper. As I pushed the door to the greengrocer's open, an old-fashioned bell rang out above my head, and just a couple of seconds later, a rather dour-looking woman appeared behind the counter.
Hello there,
I said, in a rather jolly tone.
Aye.
Was all she offered in return.
Yes, well, I'm not from round here.
Obviously.
She interjected. At least I was awarded a few extra syllables this time.
Quite.
I said.
Yes, quite. I was wondering if you'd be able to help me with some directions. My sat-nav and my phone have gone a bit flaky, you see.
Aye.
She said.
There's nae much signal outside the town. You'll need to know where you're going before you leave, unless you're just following the main road. Faz are you heading, man?
It's a place called Sithean Blair,
I said. She didn't respond. Not at first, anyway. That dour expression flickered for a moment, and I was certain I saw something else behind those eyes. Was it fear?
Okay, and what kind of business do you have at the likes of Sithean Blair?
She asked.
Oh, you do know it then?
I ventured.
Aye, I ken it. Everybody round here kens it. Are you a friend of,
She paused as though galvanizing herself.
hers?
I smiled my most charming smile.
If you're referring to Agatha...
Did I see the shopkeeper flinch at the sound of Agatha's name?
Then I'm yet to have the pleasure. But an old friend of mine is staying with her tonight, and I need to touch base with him. In person. You understand?
Nah, I didn't understand. I didn't understand why anyone would want to head up on that place on the end of a full moon.
Oh, I'm quite aware of the challenge that might present, and I can assure you, I have no intention of being anywhere near the place come nightfall.
Ach, yeah, are you? Then you'll also know that she's rumoured to be, well, that she's
A witch? Yes, so I understand. Now, if you'll be kind enough to furnish me with the directions I asked for, I shall trouble you no more and be on my way.
Upon returning to my car, I couldn't help but check on the status of my passenger. I glanced this way and that, checking that there were no prying eyes, and although I couldn't see anyone, I had the distinct feeling that curtains were twitching, and I was being regarded with resentful eyes. Nonetheless, my passenger was as I'd left him, by which I mean he appeared to be quite dead. It was not much more than 9 or 10 miles from Braemar to the remote estate, high in the mountains. I felt my ears pop occasionally as we climbed higher and higher into the gloomy overhang of the darkening clouds that coloured the sky in their own image. Eventually, I found the old metal 5-bar gate which bridged a gap in the dry stone wall. It was easily wide enough for a large tractor with harvest trailer to pass through, let alone a tiny Ford Fiesta like mine. The gate was, however, closed. It was also adorned with a barbed wire wrapper across its upper beam, and a sign which said private. Keep out. In very bold letters. A sign I intended to utterly ignore. Obviously. I applied the handbrake and approached the gate. It wasn't locked, or at least I couldn't see any padlocks or chains. A simple task it would be then, or so I thought, to swing it in and clear the way ahead. Well, you've probably guessed. It didn't exactly work out as expected. The gate was stuck fast, and try as I might, I couldn't budge it even a single inch. I tried pulling it out when pushing it in didn't work, but nothing. It occurred to me that pushing out from the inside might afford a little extra purchase, and so I scaled the 5 bars with the intention of hopping over and having another go. It was a strange sensation. I didn't really feel what had happened to me, but I suddenly found myself on my arse, looking at the gate and wondering what the blazes had gone on. A few blinks and a shake of the head didn't provide any answers, so I tried again. Same result. Just as I was about to swing my leg over the top bar of the gate, I was repelled and found myself in the dirt. It did occur to me to try and use the Dagger of Amun-Ra to open the gate, but that would mean removing it from the vampire's heart, and I didn't have any intention of doing that. I scratched my head, deep in thought, and then suddenly I heard a man's voice.
"Can I help you?"
he called from inside the gate. This man, who appeared to be a natural inhabitant of the hillside, dressed in sturdy neoprene boots and a tweed suit, rather elegant actually, had apparently driven along the trail to the gate, parked his Land Rover, alighted, and taken a position with his elbows resting on the top bar, without my noticing. That was a bit strange. "Hello there," I said as I got to my feet, dusting myself off again. I don't seem to be able to get in,"
"I can see that,"
said the man.
"And why would you be trying to do that? I assume you can read."
He glanced in the direction of the sign on the gate.
"Oh, that, yes, I did see that,"
I replied.
My name is Simon de Montfort. I'm a friend of Ernest Wainwright's. Is he here?"
The man squinted as he slowly inspected my form. He didn't say anything. He just seemed to be taking me all in, every detail, like he was scanning me in some way.
"I said, I'm a friend of Ernest Wainwright."
"I heard what you said. Why can't you get through my gate?"
"Well, I was rather hoping you could tell me that."
"I have placed a charm on this gate, on the whole boundary to this estate. A charm that keeps people out, or in. A special kind of people. What is it that's so special about you that you can't open my gate?"
He just stared at me again. I have to admit, he was a very impressive man. So confident. Probably in his late 50s, maybe a little bit more, but hard to tell because he looked so healthy. All that mountain air, I suppose. I really didn't know how to answer him, so I just paused for a moment. And then this urge sort of... Well, it was as though I suddenly had no choice but to speak the truth and just blurt it all out.
Well, you see, I am in fact that Simon de Montfort, 6th Earl of Leicester, father of British democracy. I drank from the Holy Grail on a crusade, and Jesus Christ himself blessed me with 2,000 years of immortality. I really am a friend of Ernest's, and I have a dead vampire in the boot of my car. Oh, shit. I couldn't believe what I'd just said. How could I have said all of that to a total stranger? I slammed both my hands across my mouth to try and prevent any more truth escaping from it.
You better come in,
said the man as he swung the gate inwards to allow me access.
My name's Garrow, and this is my mother's land. Ernest is with her at her farmhouse. I was about to padlock that gate to keep the muggles out.
Muggles? I asked. Is that really a word that witches use? He just laughed at me and beckoned me through. It's not a familiar feeling, but I suddenly felt like a third former who was having the piss taken out of him by one of the cool kids from upper 6th. We drove for a while through the winding trail across the rocky and mountainous terrain, passing a fork in the road by which stood a small wooden sign with the word Croft etched into it. We continued for another mile or so before cresting a hilltop, beyond which I saw a picture-perfect granite farmhouse in a dusty old courtyard. The whole thing was surrounded by yet another dry stone wall and a gate very similar to the one we'd just left behind, guarding its entrance. Thick smoke puffed its way into the afternoon sky from the ancient chimney pot on the farmhouse roof. We pulled up long enough to permit Garrow to open the gate, and I followed him in, parking up as a few chickens and goats shuffled out of the way.
Come on, let's get you inside,
said Garrow as I climbed out of the car, and he led me to the farmhouse door. Inside, it was warm. So very warm. It was a kitchen and dining area like something from a bygone era. An Aga-type oven pumped heat into the air, and a large open fire near the table roared and crackled. In front of the fire, in an old wooden rocking chair, sat one of the sweetest and oldest women I have ever seen. She wore a fluffy dressing gown that covered her feet, and long white hair was bunched into a ponytail that fell over her left shoulder. She stared into the fire as she gently rocked in her chair. She didn't seem to have noticed me at all.
And this is Simon de Montfort,
she suddenly said, without looking up.
You're the 6th Earl of Leicester, are you not? Still alive and kicking and stood here in my kitchen?
I didn't know quite what to say. I mean, I'd only just met Garrow at the gate. How could she know? She turned in her chair to face me, and those eyes, they were so... How can I put it? They sparkled like living emeralds. It's so strange. I am quite literally ancient myself, and yet I felt like a child in her presence. Yes, I said, almost in a whisper. But how could you? She glared at me and raised a single ancient eyebrow before she spoke.
Well, we've been expecting you. You were in my tea leaves this morning.
You saw that? In your tea leaves? I asked, unable to hide my incredulity.
Okay, there's not much that doesn't show up in me tea. And Ernest mentioned you might drop by as well. Have you brought his wee dagger back?
She laughed to herself before continuing. She couldn't quite conceal the mirth in her tone, and I sensed a welcome warmth from her, which set me at ease, even if just a little. Yes, I have. Is Ernest here? I asked. Yes, of course I am, my dear boy.
said Ernest as he entered the room from what transpired to be the water closet to the rear of the kitchen. He crossed the room quickly with open arms, and we embraced, warmly. Garrow placed 4 unmatching mugs filled with strong Highland tea onto the kitchen table, and he suggested we all take a seat and have a wee cuppa, as he put it. Garrow informed me that no matter what my business here was, he would be padlocking all of the gates within the next hour at most, as dusk was approaching, and the werewolf, Charlie Mortimer, would soon be abroad, stalking the hillsides, in search of flesh to feast upon. I asked where Charlie was at that precise moment.
We've a wee croft on this land. He's in there, but as soon as the moon is up, he'll be out and about. You wouldn't want to cross his path the night, I can assure you of that. But this Dagger of Ernest's, that's why you're here, isn't it?
I smiled at Agatha. While I was quite certain that either she or her son could do unthinkable harm, even to one such as myself, I had a feeling of acceptance from them both, which gave succour to my weary spirits.
Yes, but I'm rather hoping I can help the situation with your friend Charlie while I'm here too.
This caught everyone's interest, with a possible exception of Garrow, whom I found to be occasionally rather inscrutable.
You see, Ernest informs me that the best way to cure Charlie of his lycanthropy requires the exploitation of a vampire. And, well, I've brought you one. He's locked up in the boot of my car.
Fit that tiny wee thing?
Gasped Agatha.
He must be a tiny wee vampire to fit in the tiny wee boot of that tiny wee wagon.
Well,
I said, a dash of rouge appearing upon my warming cheeks.
I did sort of have to stuff him in there somewhat. He may be a little bit broken, but why don't we pop outside and take a look? See if you can use him.
It took a few minutes for Agatha to rise from her chair and shuffle across the kitchen, assisted by an old walking stick made of ash, which she grasped in her gnarled arthritic hand. Garrow wrapped one of his wax jackets around his mother's shoulders as we stepped out of the warmth of the kitchen and crunched our way across the grit of the courtyard, where I had left my car. I clicked the fob to unlock the doors, and then the tailgate button, opening the trunk remotely as I did so. As the lid lifted, a pair of white lights came on automatically, illuminating the hitherto obfuscated offering. His corpse was twisted and very rudely stuffed in a rather uncaring manner, the way a teenager might pack a suitcase for a holiday in Mallorca. Ostensibly he was on his back, but I'd had to break his legs to fit them in properly, and they were stuffed in behind him, which had the effect of presenting his chest in a skyward manner. I'd needed to punch him repeatedly in the face to get his head to fit under the back parcel shelf, and I'm afraid I'd made rather a mess of his features. But any degree of care in that department did strike me as being somewhat superfluous. The Dagger of Amun-Ra twinkled in the electric interior light at the side of the trunk. It was sunk to the hilt.
ta-da!
I said in a theatrical manner as I gestured towards the dead human in my car.
One dagger, which I until recently thought was a fake, and one dead vampire.
Garrow, Ernest, and Agatha exchanged furtive looks. Not the overwhelm of joy and gratitude I'd imagined, truth be told.
What?
I asked.
What is it? Do you know him or something?
Oh, no, Simon. said Ernest.
No, it's not that at all. The truth is that I may not have furnished you with all the necessary attributes of the vampire we require to help with Charlie's predicament. Attributes?
I asked.
What do you mean, attributes? Well, I really hadn't expected you to just pop out and get me one, Simon, or I might have mentioned that they would need to be alive when they got here.
Ernest spoke with kindness, as he always did, but Garrow snorted a derisive laugh under his breath. Agatha sort of had a mischievous look in her eye. She seemed to be enjoying the moment.
Well, why didn't you say?
I said. I reached for the Dagger of Amun-Ra, and with a flourish, I grabbed the handle and pulled it out of the murdered creature's unmoving chest. Instantly, the vampire gasped for air as previously inanimate flesh became animated once more. Garrow snatched the dagger from my hand and thrust it unceremoniously back into the vampire's chest, causing him to die. Again. I genuinely felt a little sympathy for him at this point.
This vampire is not good to us,
said Garrow, coldly.
We need a healthy vampire that's willing to assist, not one in his wretched condition. You've turned him into a bloody zombie.
What? Have I? And precisely how is it that you can state with such confidence that I've done such a thing? I'm an immortal human, not a practicer of black magic or voodoo or any of that nonsense.
Agatha looked at Ernest and said,
Oh, he's a funny one, isn't he? Did he just say black magic is nonsense?
Ernest winced slightly, but nodded at Agatha with an air of shared mirth.
You stabbed him with the Dagger of Amun-Ra, did you not?
Said Garrow.
Yes, I did, but I didn't have much of an option. I mean, he'd already bloody killed me once, and in any case, how would that bloody trinket have turned him into a zombie? I mean, I thought it was a fake, as I said earlier. I mean, I stabbed Will the werewolf in the back with the bloody thing, and he just laughed it off. What's the bloody deal here?
More furtive looks were exchanged, but I was sure I caught a hint of accusation about the way Garrow stared at Ernest.
Simon, I think there may have been some level of misunderstanding on this matter regarding the Dagger of Amun-Ra. Oh dear. When we were discussing your recent encounter with Gigio Voston Hawundakin Fultonium Brusk, and congratulations again on killing him, by the way. Very impressive.
Ernest nodded at me in approval as he said this, and Garrow muttered the words, "Good work," under his breath.
Yes,
I said.
What of it? Be certain that I said to you it was a shame you didn't have the Dagger of Amun-Ra with you at that time, as that would have stopped him in his tracks. I believe I described to you how this dagger, this very dagger, has the power to separate a human soul from that which binds it to the wicked spirit that fuses with it to create the vampire. It essentially allows the human to die completely in the case of the curse of the vampire.
Did you? I asked.
Yes, Simon, I'm rather afraid I did.
Vampires, you say?
Yes, vampires.
Not werewolves, then?
No, Simon. Not werewolves. Vampires. I actually had no idea what this dagger would do to a werewolf, but I think we found that out now, haven't we?
Agatha hooted with laughter.
I I'd bugger all to his bloody werewolf anyway.
I smiled at her, still a little confused. Then why did I think? Oh, Simon, said Ernest. I'm afraid you were sailing at the very least 3 sheets to the wind. I know you'd just come out of the Priory and all that, but that didn't seem to stop you from working your way through 3 bottles of very good claret at the dinner table. I think you may have got things a trifle mixed up. An instant tide of humiliation arose within me, splashing a combination of dread and embarrassment up through my sinking guts and into my contorting countenance. Oh, shit, I said. Yes, I'm rather afraid so, said Ernest. So, why does this bloody thing keep coming back to life when you pull the dagger out? I asked.
Quite simple, really,
said Garrow.
When the blade is in that body, it dies completely, and the human soul that's been trapped within it is released, which is a good thing, and it's conclusive. But the death of the body, that's just a process, not a conclusion. If you pull the blade out, then the process is reversed, and you're back to square one, just without the human soul, which has moved on. So you're left with an animated corpse, a zombie, which is also a vampire. I mean, it's far worse than what you started off with, if I'm being brutally honest.
Silence fell for a few moments as this information sank into me. Then, what the hell do we do now? I asked the group as a whole.
Oh, it's quite simple, really. You help me drag this lump around the back of the farmhouse and we'll douse it in petrol and set the bastard on fire. Once it's burnt to cinders, it'll be safe to remove the dagger, and I'll give it back to Ernest.
You'll give it back? I asked.
Oh, aye,
said Garrow.
Once we got this thing into the trench for burning, you're free to leave. In fact, I insist upon it. Darkness will be falling before you know it. And in case it's escaped your attention, we've a lycanthrope on this property to take care of, and well, that's tricky enough task on its own merit. You're proving to be something of a liability, if you don't mind me saying.
I absolutely and utterly bloody did mind his saying, but I didn't call him out on it. Sometimes in life it's wise for one to choose one's battles judiciously, and I really didn't fancy getting into it with Garrow quite literally in his own backyard, if I'm honest. Instead, I thanked him, which drew from him what appeared to be the distant cousin of a smile. This trench of yours? I asked Garrow as we set about our task with Ernest watching on and Agatha cackling away somewhere nearby like an excited child on Christmas morning. He nodded for me to continue. Have you... Is this something you just permanently have all dug out and ready to go, just in case you need to burn a corpse or two to cinders?
Aye,
he said, without looking up. And have you ever had to use it before? In anger, as it were? With a vampire? I ventured. Garrow glanced at his mother and Ernest, a definite twinkle manifesting in his steely green eye.
Oh, aye, you'd be surprised. You'd be very, very surprised.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.